So today's topic, electric vehicles, everyone's favorite because everyone has an opinion. So I'm not going to tell you which one to buy. I'll leave that to you. And if you're choosing not to, I'll also leave that to you. I'm just going to focus on why there's such a hot topic among folks who are worried about greenhouse gases. What are some of their good points? I'm going to start with the US, then I'm going to expand to the world. I'm also going to talk about reduction, a topic that doesn't get covered too much when it comes to the area of automobiles. So, as a quick review, transportation greenhouse gases accounts for about 29% of what the US emits, remembering that these are just rough numbers. And automobiles, which in this case is including SUVs, any truck under 6,000, that's going to account for a little over 50% of that transportation sector. So right away, there's a lot of bang for your buck, if you will, if you focus on reducing emissions in the transportation and specifically the automobile area. So that's, if you didn't know already, why it's such a hot topic. So before talking tech, let's talk Tesla for a minute. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the finances and stock and all that stuff. It gets lots of press. I do worry that if Tesla does not do well as a company and runs into hard times, and with what's going on with their competition in China, slowdown in the EV market in the US, that it could set the whole industry back 5 or 10 years. I mention that because sometimes the tech, maybe more than sometimes, is not always the big obstacle. It's the implementation. So whether it's Tesla or some of the other technologies, it's not just about whether it can work, it's whether or not you can make it survive for the long term. And in the situation with Tesla, my concern lies from yes, they've broken the glass, they've broken the mold, they've been pioneering in it. That company needs to transition to the more mature company. Can they do it? I hope so, but I also have to tell you, I wouldn't buy their stock. So, in my technical evaluation of electric vehicles, we can start with some of the basics. Electric motors are well understood, so that's a very mature technology. The pacing item, no surprise, has always been batteries. Batteries have gotten a lot better. That's why you see EVs on the road, but they're not where they need to be to make an EV fully cost competitive and solve some of the concerns people have with range, charging, etc. So a lot of progress has been made for the technology to succeed. Further improvement is needed. So EVs aren't just about tech, it's also about being able to afford one. So the US has rolled out tax credit, got some words you can see on the screen. Bottom line is, when I look at it from a point of view of is it good industrial policy? Sure is. Yeah, you'll see that in a minute when we talk about world EV sales because it's giving the US market a chance to have some of its own players. I am a little less certain about whether or not it's going to bridge the gap because since EVs are not fully affordable today without the tax credit, the question is when is that day going to arrive? And in my estimation, when I look at the tech and so much of this revolves around batteries and affordability, I think that date is like 15 years. The tax credit's going to bridge 5 years of that, but then what happens after five? Now, am I certain about that estimate? Not at all. But 5 years, six, seven, for us to have EVs costing less than internal combustion without being subsidized, I don't like the odds that that's going to happen. This is why I'd like to keep hybrids in the mix. They may be what we need to help us bridge the gap. So, worldwide, China and then the EU are significantly ahead of the US. So, when I mentioned the tax credit being good industrial policy, you can see that some other countries are out ahead of the US on EVs. That's not necessarily a bad thing for the US. They will be working out some of the bugs, and we have a little more what is often termed legacy infrastructure. We really love our cars. We use them differently than a lot of other countries. So a slower adoption is to be expected, even if we would like to do it faster. An alternative to EVs are cars with fuel cells. There are reasons why they haven't made it. We'll touch on that in a future video. So you can see from the data that the EVs are roughly 3 times more emission friendly than an internal combustion engine. That's good. It's not zero. Zero is when you don't take the trip to the grocery store every 3 days, but instead you go shopping once every 2 weeks and load up the car that way. And then you could just reduce it, right? If you don't want to do it every 2 weeks, 1 week is doing it every week is still better than every 3 days. So also the speed at which you travel, and this applies to EVs every bit as much as it does to internal combustion engine. In most energy equations, the velocity is squared. What does that mean? It means that when you are increasing speed, it has an outsized effect on your miles per gallon, which in turn goes to emissions. So slow down. Maybe speed limits need to be changed. Maybe if you want to feel like you can have an impact, you need to be talking to your local governments. It doesn't have to be a federal thing about lowering the speed limits and enforcing them. And I'm going to say something really unpopular now. Maybe even traffic cameras, because they do work. People hate them. I hate them too. But it may be one of the things that's not high tech that can have a big impact. So, time for the tech readiness scorecard. So, we'll take a look first greenhouse effectiveness. So, we have some good effectiveness with EVs. It is heavily tied, though, to where the power comes from. So an EV in, say, Sweden running off of hydro is going to be a lot more beneficial in greenhouse impact than an EV running in China working off of coal. So tech readiness and cost effectiveness in the case of electric vehicles tends to blur together somewhat because it is the cost effectiveness that's saying whether it's fully ready. In the case of EVs, a lot of it has to do with the batteries and what sort of tech curve they're going to go down. If you take a look and say, okay, where is it compared to, say, solar? I'm going to estimate then that where we're at today is when it's just starting to make sense, like solar did 15 years ago, when you looked at total life cycle cost, but was having trouble competing on a just, hey, can I put it on today? Can I afford to do it basis? I got a little information there on how panel cost has come down. So that's why it gets the scores it does in cost effectiveness and tech. Um, Another piece to this puzzle is the whole issue of trucks. So are EVs going to continue to be able to scale up? So you got your Chevy Bolt, which frankly is a really good car in terms of cost effectiveness. And then you move up the line and you look at, for instance, the Volvo S90, which I would really like to have, but not for $90,000. And that's just a plug-in hybrid. So are EVs going to be able to continue to scale? Are batteries going to be able to do that? Or is it going to be able to go to trucks? That is a lot more TBD. So stay tuned on that. We'll revisit that again in a few years. So you can see the overall score. It's a good score, so EVs are not a fantasy, but they're not nearly as ready for rapid and strong adoption the way solar is to help with emissions. So, as always, let me know what you think of my scores and like, subscribe, and comment. Thank you for your time. See you again soon.